Hello, everyone. We are sorry we're a couple of minutes late. We're still looking for one of our co-hosts, Garrick, and we will bring him on stage. But I am really excited to introduce our next session, next speaker, Simon Brown. Simon is the Chief Learning Officer at Novartis and author of the book you see on the screen right there. It's a #1 release on Amazon. It's called The Curious Advantage: The Greatest Driver of Value in the Digital Age, Curiosity. So I'm really excited. I've read the book. It's a fantastic book. Looking forward to listening to Simon and Garrick today. Once we find Garrick, we'll bring him on stage. He is the co-author of this book with Simon, and he's a co-founder and partner at Ludic. And he provides award-winning state-of-the-art programs with unique digital transformation, learning, and engagement tools that are changing the game. So I'm going to hand it over to Simon, who's going to get started, and then I'm going to go hunt down Garrick and get him on stage. How does that sound? Welcome, Simon. It is so exciting to have you here.
Perfect. Thank you, Brandon. Great to be here. And I'm sure Garrick is wandering the virtual corridors behind the scenes and will be with us momentarily. As Brandon said, so I'm Simon Brown, Chief Learning Officer at Novartis, and I'm going to take you through some of the key messages from our book, The Curious Advantage. I'd like to start with a question. So does it feel to you like the world is getting faster, that things are constantly changing, things are accelerating, there's so much to know, and it's hard to keep up with it all? Maybe that sounds familiar to you. It was 2 years ago at the World Economic Forum in Davos that Justin Trudeau reflected on this, and he talked about how the pace of change has never been this fast, but it will never be this slow again. The world is getting faster. And all of us have the challenge of keeping up with it, or risk falling behind, or even worse, risk becoming a liability. And with COVID, that just accelerated even more. Satya Nadella said last year how we've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in just 2 months. Within Novartis, we saw 60,000 people move to virtual working over one weekend. Somehow we have to keep up with all of this. Astro Teller at Google, yes, the best job title I think I've ever heard of, Captain of Moonshots, gives us an explanation around what's actually happening. And on this diagram, you see across the middle, the rate of change of human adaptability. So how fast can we all cope with the changing world? And then you see the rate of change of technology and that exponential curve. And to explain what's happening today, where we are is now faster than, has moved ahead of where we can actually adapt to. And that's why it feels so hard to keep up with it all. Fortunately, though, Astro offers a solution to how we can deal with this. And his solution is that we need to learn faster. Some other data that backs up how things are speeding up. So nearly 20% of the skill set that we all have will be irrelevant in 3 years' time. So just think of that, nearly 20% of what we all rely on day in, day out, and it's going to be irrelevant in just 3 years' time. And at the same time as the skills that we have expiring, a third of people have learned a new-to-world skill in the last 3 years. So a new-to-world skill being something that didn't exist 3 years ago, maybe data science in its current form, bot management. One example would be blockchain. So a Gartner survey in 2018 of CIOs, only 1% of them were doing anything with blockchain. But if we look at the 2020 LinkedIn skills survey, #1 technical skill in demand was blockchain. So in the space of just 2 years, we've seen something going from only 1% of organizations doing anything with it to it being the most in-demand skill of the year. The World Economic Forum did some analysis and released a report last year. 40% of the core skills that we have will change in the next 5 years, and half of us are going to need reskilling as a result. And at the same time, the skills that we have are diminishing. So the half-life of a learned skill is 5 years. So that means if we learned something 10 years ago, after 5 years, half of it's expired. After another 5 years, it's all gone. And that research was actually done in 2011. Research by IBM more recently showed that time is accelerating more. So how do we, as humans, stay relevant? How do we learn faster? How do we ask questions? And what we propose is it's curiosity that is the way we solve that. It's not just us that, as the authors of the book, that agree with this. So our CEO at Novartis, when we interviewed him around curiosity, shared with us how curiosity is critical for success in our increasingly complex world. And we'd go further to say we feel it's the greatest driver of value actually in the digital world today. But what you may not know is there's many almost superpowers behind curiosity.
And it looks like we may have lost Simon. Maybe a connection problem in Basel. Yeah, I'm curious as to what happened, Simon. It's just me, so I could talk about Simon's book. It's a really great book. But let's wait and see if we can get him back. We're also looking for his co-author, who's having some problems connecting, I believe, also from Switzerland. Has anyone in the feed here, has anyone read the book? Not yet. Yeah, it's a really interesting book with some practical tips on how to invoke more curiosity in your teams and your organization. Yeah, but there's definitely a lot of books to read, right? I think this is one of the more interesting ones for folks like us in the L&D space when we're trying to, figure out how do we develop folks through this skills chasm that a lot of us are experiencing. When so many of us, like he was saying in the early parts of his slides, so many of us are needing to learn new skills. It looks like we have Garrick. Oh, he's in London.
Hi there.
And Simon. Do we have Garrick?
Hi.
All right.
Yay, success.
Welcome back, Simon, and welcome to you, Garrick. Thank you for making a hurdle into our virtual world. We appreciate that.
Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Garrick. We can, yes.
Great stuff. Thank you.
Very good. And I'm hoping you can see my slides again as well.
Yes, we can see it. I'll shut up now and we'll resume. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Perfect. So apologies for the minor technical hitch there. So I'm going to share with you 5 reasons why we consider curiosity actually to be a bit like a superpower. So firstly, research from the University of California tells us that curiosity actually helps you to learn better. Not just to motivate you to learn by being curious, but actually if you invoke curiosity at the time that you learn, it actually helps to strengthen the neural pathways and you actually retain the information better. So curiosity helps you learn better. Secondly, research in the Harvard Business Review shows how curiosity actually powers up your decision making and helps you to make better decision making. In fact, it reduces the amount of decision making errors because you think through all of the different combinations, all of the different ways that things could pan out, and that curiosity actually helps you to make better decisions. Also, research by Harvard shows how that curiosity helps to reduce conflict within a team. So rather than having a situation where someone has a different point of view and you're defensive and go up against it, actually by being curious to understand why might someone think that, why might someone have a different perspective to me, it helps to act better understand and therefore reducing conflict that actually goes on within a team. Research also tells us that curiosity boosts communication skills, that if we're curious, we actually listen better, and that helps us to communicate better. And then finally, research by Spencer Harrison at INSEAD found that actually there's a link between curiosity and greater innovation. We're more curious, we're more creative, and that drives greater innovation. So that's 5 reasons why it acts somewhat like a superpower. And organizations are starting to see this value within curiosity. So a few years ago, billboards like this appeared in Silicon Valley alongside Highway 101. No branding at all, just a curious puzzle. And for those that were curious and figured out the answer to the piece in the brackets there and went to the website that it took you to, they found another puzzle. And if they were further curious and they went on and they explored a series of different puzzles, when they got to the end of it, there was a potential for a job offer. And it was actually a recruitment campaign by Google looking to hire curious people. Within Novartis, we also recognize the value of curiosity, and we have it as part of our culture. Our culture is around being inspired, being curious, and being unbossed. and we're embracing curiosity across the company. And we've gone on to actually support people to spend 5% of their time or 100 hours a year in being curious. We've set that aspiration. But what does curiosity actually mean? And Garrick, I'll hand over to you to share our definition on curiosity.
Thank you, Simon. It was fascinating embarking on this research because we were looking at learning initially, and then through our research, we took a multidisciplinary approach. We looked at neuroscience and anthropology and behaviorism and history, and we wanted to really try and get a synthesis of what this means. And we came to an understanding that curiosity is having an attitude of wonder with a spirit of exploration. And with this point of exploration that really honed into why curiosity is effective and has value, as Simon was saying, but it's not just wondering about interesting things or being gossipy or getting involved in things. It's actually doing stuff, and it's linking that wonder that you have with doing stuff that really makes curiosity come alive. Could see the next one, please. So the question, of course, is why are we curious? And Simon's talked about some of the value stuff, but we are wired for curiosity. We are fundamentally, you can see it in kids. I mean, this is nothing new, but the more we looked into the neuroscience of it, it's curiosity that defines the hormones we secrete at any moment in time, flight or fight. It's curiosity that defines how we approach or tackle something, how we get into something new, what our attitudes are to learning new things. And it's curiosity that gives us the basis or the platform for going further than we have before. We are hardwired for there's research which suggests that the more curious you are, the more defense you have against things like Alzheimer's and so on. It's a new topic, but curiosity is at the heart of what we are as human beings. So how do we be successfully curious? Well, we went through an interesting study, and we dumped all of our various researchers into buckets, and we came up with, we found that of our clusters, 5 of them began with the letter C. And so, of course, Simon, Paul, and myself spent some time thinking, well, can we make everything begin with the letter C? Why not? That's a good model. And we found that we could. We came up with 7 C's. And of course, as soon as we talked about the 7 C's, we realized we had a metaphor, and our curiosity had taken us to somewhere very interesting. Sailing the 7 C's is something that all cultures, if you look in literature, have used. The Persians, the Venetians, the Chinese, the Americans, the current global situation, we all talk about the 7 C's, but we all mean different things. And the 7 clusters of work that we came up with were context, community, curation, creativity, construction, criticality, and confidence. And these are the 7 clusters which we think, we don't say this is what you need to be curious, but we say if you are curious and you want to embark on something and understand it, you need to consider these 7 clusters, these 7 ideas, because they'll make you more successfully curious. Let's have a look at the 7 C's. The first one is context. And context, the meaning is in the name. It's with language or with text. When we move into any situation, we establish linkages of meanings in our brain, and linkages of meanings between people, and linkages of meaning that come from history or books and neighbors. But all of those links create context. It's the meaning that is in the world and the meaning we make of the world. And in order to be curious, one of the first things you do as a human being is you start to map the language, and you map the meaning you find. Perhaps you're trying to learn jazz. I'm a pianist, and I'm a classically trained pianist, and I decided I wanted to learn jazz at some point, and I had to learn the language of jazz at all these different languages before I could go in and start to actually play. So the ability to read and map context, to understand language and connections and new ideas and concepts is at the heart of mapping out the field that you're going to inhabit as a curious individual. It's not a solo act being curious. You have to have a community. There are always gatekeepers or people who are going to lead you in, and people who are going to teach you the language that you need. Especially because it's a sensory network that has implications as you as you learn these languages, you become more curious. It opens doors to further curiosity. If you take a mind map at the beginning of the year about a topic, jazz again, and then at the end of the year, you do another mind map and you compare the two, you will have seen you've learned a huge amount more, made more connections. You need a community to do it, and there are different roles. Many people, the best thing we do is find the first person who knows about your topic. I began speaking to somebody who was a jazz musician, and he led me to the jazz workshop, which was linked to Charles Mingus, and that's how I started to get into jazz. But a community is at the heart of being curious. Curation. It's an interesting word. It comes from editing, and you can think of curators of exhibitions, a curation of an object or an idea. This is an image of a room in the Doge's Palace in Venice. We found a lot about Venice, and you can read that in our book, which is fascinating. This was a curious culture. And in the Doge's Palace, they had rooms for different things to do, rooms for justice, rooms for social intercourse, social working together. They had rooms for geography. They had rooms to figure out where they were going to go as a community. This particular room, the map room, was the room that they used to define what the borders of Venice were and how they were going to shift and protect and move it forward. It was always up to date, but it was the place where they made decisions, and they curated all they'd learned from all their journeys. Every journey in that Venetian galley took was mapped and was documented and had an impact on their ideas of where they wanted to go. Curation is about filtering your information overload. Your community can help you with that. Moving from the very broad to the specific. Synthesizing information, that's bringing lots of information together, allowing it to settle and to understand what it does to take you forward with new ideas, and making choices. Creativity. We found creativity, unsurprisingly, to be at the heart, and an attitude of being curious and an attitude of creativity is absolutely vital. This is an image of when they put the Martian Pathfinder onto Mars. They had budget cuts at NASA, about $1 billion. And so they had to give up the idea of accurately placing a rocket on a specific point on Mars. What they did was they came up with the innovation of surrounding the Pathfinder with balloons, and they essentially bounced it onto the surface of Mars, and it landed where it would. One of the Pathfinders, as we know, landed in a crater, and it took a few years to get it out. But creativity is at the heart of being open. And creativity and having a creative mindset to explore things broadly, to take on board things that make you feel uncomfortable, things that you're not sure about. Being creative allows you to go there and to keep things open. And at the heart of curiosity is keeping things open. I talked earlier about exploration and that spirit of exploration and making and doing. And you must remember that all of our research is in the context of the digital age. What does this mean for us in the digital age? And curiously, humans are at the center of being curious, and humans are at the center of the digital reality. And construction, or the ability to make something, to build things together and to learn together, is really the thing that reinforces curiosity, reinforces neural pathways, and launches a flood of hormones that lay down these pathways and reinforce them. Construction, we talk about building together, doing things in labs, learning by making curious experiments, making testing and exploring in the world. And for me, it was about the first time I started to perform jazz with other jazz musicians that really took me into that world. Criticality, I mean, I talk about this all the time, and this was my big aha moment when we did our research, that we came up with all of this work around unconscious bias. And if you're going to go down into new territory, especially as an organization which is curious, or especially as an individual who is curious, you have to be very aware of your unconscious biases. And this is a wonderful map by Buster Benson of about 192 psychologically configured biases that we are prone to. And the point about being aware of criticality and your unconscious bias is biases tend to keep us safe. And the idea of being curious is to go outside of the things that make us safe. The other thing that bias does is it might take us down a route that we feel comfortable in, or it might take us down a route that doesn't open us to new ideas, or it might take us down a route that is easy for us to explore. It just reinforces our existing beliefs. And the thing about being critically aware of we do a great podcast, and I'll talk about these, called the Curious Advantage podcast series. We did one with some investigative journalists, people who live in the world of criticality. They have to get close to some very interesting stories, some very interesting people, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But at all times, they have to make sure that the data they're receiving from these networks is critically justified, and they can talk about it and write about it dispassionately and with some critical distance. And criticality is at the heart, unconscious bias is at the heart of being aware of being open and going into new areas. Confidence. Our co-author Paul talks about confidence a lot, because if you climb rocks, anybody who's done that, what they teach you is not how to climb up a mountain. What they teach you is how to survive a fall. And you constantly do a meter and you fall, or 2 meters and you fall, or 6 feet or 12 feet if you're imperial, and you fall. And what you do is you become very confident in how to manage the failure of climbing. That gives you the confidence to go up and to tackle some of the bigger challenges. The thing about curiosity is it takes you into the unknown, and it establishes everyday habits. You have to have the right tools. You need to build into failure, and you need to have the freedom to experiment. But the more you do so, the more jazz I played, the more confident I became. And it's confidence that is the platform on which all curiosity is built. So here are our 7 C's: context, community, creativity, construction, criticality, and confidence. And I'm sure I've missed one because of my eyesight. Curation. The 7 C's, they're not in an order. They might be in an order, but they do build on each other. And the beginning, context, and the end, confidence. Confidence gives you the ability to go back to the beginning and to continually iterate as you work on curiosity and build it into your life and move yourself forward. Simon, how are you doing it at Novartis?
Exactly. Thank you, Garrick. So we built curiosity into our culture within Novartis, and we made the case back in 2019 to go big on learning for 2 reasons. One was around attracting and retaining the best talent, and one was around building the skills in order to make sure that we can deliver against the business strategy. As part of that, we built a culture of curiosity where learning is valued, learning is recognized, and where we wanted to provide the best learning opportunities. And as I mentioned earlier, provide people with the time and the space in order to be able to learn. And as part of that, we set this aspiration for people to be spending 100 hours on learning. Where we were in 2018, we were on 22.6 hours of learning on average across the organization. And over the last 2 years, we first saw a 58% increase in the amount of learning people were doing. And then in 2020, we saw a further 28% increase on that. So a significant increase in the curiosity and the amount of time that people are actually spending in building their skills and being curious in learning. We also saw engagement rise significantly from Q2 2019. We were 2 points behind the industry benchmark on engagement around great opportunities to learn and grow. Where we closed out 2020, we were 5 points ahead. So we saw a significant increase in engagement around learning. And that was recognized externally through awards and publications. Why that's important is because if I come back to that goal of attracting and retaining the best talent, we've asked over 1 million people who have applied to join the company, what was it that inspired you to apply to join the company? And the number one reason that people were inspired was the opportunities to learn and develop. So it's working as an attraction tool in line with our goal. We're also seeing it filter through into our ESG ratings as well. So significant improvements in our human capital scores as a result of the curiosity and learning that's going in across the company. If you're interested in hearing more, maybe check out the podcasts. So we have now, is it nearly 20, I think, Garrick?
Yep, right. I think
yep.
Nearly 20.
With a range. Good gun, yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. You've starred the ones that have a strong learning focus.
Exactly. So the likes of Josh Bursin and various CLOs and so forth. So they're all available on your favorite podcast servers as well. And if you're interested in hearing more, then check out the book as well, available through Amazon and all good booksellers under the Curious Advantage.
We're looking at research on specifically quantifying the relationship between curiosity in a system and an organization, and the value that it generates. So that's where we're going with that. We also have learned a lot about how you apply curiosity to an organization and enable it to be part of your learning strategy. We have a great podcast with Gordon Fuller from IBM, who we've done a lot of talking to about the AI tools and the other technology that they're using to really reinforce and enable learning in the flow of work and curiosity within the system. So it's changing fundamentally how learning is to be served and the place of learning within the organization. All of these things you can find in our podcast series. And of course, if you want to know how to do it with some of the war wounds, you can read our book, which has a lot of case studies in it. Fundamentally, at the end of the day, we say about curiosity, to question is the answer. Is the answer.
There is a question from Suzanne. Did you face any resistance that people felt pressured to learn? Were they given time during work hours to set aside time for learning?
Yeah, great question, Suzanne. So we've been very clear that the 100 hours is an aspiration, and we had discussions. Should we put it into objectives, etc. And we deliberately didn't do that. That we want people to feel that they can choose to learn, or should they choose not to, then they can choose not to. But we've also tried to create the encouragement for people to be able to do that. We put on, we had a whole month dedicated to curiosity. We've helped with tools around being able to analyze how you can find and block time in your diary in order to use that for learning. We have parts of the organization that are encouraging people to sort of block a Friday afternoon, use that as your learning time, etc. So there's a range of different ways, but it's not anything you have to do. There's no individual targets that you have to do it. It's an aspiration and an encouragement and the support from the company. And it was really important that we positioned it as such.
Fantastic. Great answer. We are up against time. I really do appreciate Simon and Garrick joining us and sharing their wisdom and their book, The Curious Advantage. In our talent fair, we do have a booth dedicated to the book with a link to it for easy purchase. And I have to admit, I'm really curious about Garrick's bookcase. So I'd like to do a screenshot to peruse all of his books at some point. Because
be careful what you find, Brandon.
Again, both gentlemen, thank you so much. The Curious Advantage is the book, and we've already learned a ton from today's session. Thank you for taking the time, and appreciate your efforts at overcoming the technology problems we had. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.